Aloha. Welcome to downtown Honolulu, a city that has been proclaimed by the mayor as a city of forgiveness. Wanted to share some thoughts with you about the idea of forgiveness. Forgiveness has become a very popular subject, and I'm glad to see that that's happening. But let's first of all teach it from the top down. Where did guilt and grievances come from? Guilt and grievances are the burdens that we carry around, and forgiveness is the remedy. Forgiveness is what relieves us of having to carry the burden of guilt and grievances. Where did it all come from? How did it all start? How did we get into this mess? I'm going to try to explain to you what never happened. It's always difficult to explain what never happened. Sometimes we use ideas like the Big Bang. Well, what went bang? In the teaching that I work with, there's a lovely sentence that explains it perfectly to me. It says, "Into eternity where all is one, there crept a tiny, mad idea at which the Holy Son of God remembered not to laugh." An idea, an idea of separation. What if all is not one? What if I could be separate? What if I can have an experience of being separate from the wholeness of reality? What if I could experience special love as something that is separate? And as soon as this idea entered, there was guilt. Because in order to be separate, you have to be in denial of the wholeness of reality. You have to be in denial of God. God is love. God is one. Separation denies oneness. You cannot deny God or love without guilt. You cannot be who you are pretending to be, a separate mind contained in a separate body, without guilt, without denying love, without denying God. And so guilt immediately entered the mind, and from guilt came this whole dream of separation and pain and suffering. A dream that is driven by the madness of guilt. And so because guilt permeates the dream, now the dream unfolds in a way that justifies and verifies the guilt. The dream always unfolds in a way that supports the way that you feel. Guilt is inherent in the dream. And so everywhere you turn, there's guilt. You buy a new pair of shoes, you feel guilty about having spent so much money. You interview 3 people and hire one, you feel guilty about the 2 that you didn't hire. You left your little dog at home all alone this morning. You feel guilty about leaving your pet alone at home. Everywhere you turn, there's guilt. Everywhere you turn, the dream supports, validates the guilt that is inherent in the human condition. And you don't like the guilt. You have to live with yourself. You don't like feeling guilty. And so what you do is you people your world with others out there that you can blame. They're the bad guys. They're the ones that are at fault. And so now you've exchanged your guilt for a grievance. How do you know that you have a grievance? Well, you've got a grievance grind going around in your mind, constantly rehearsing your righteous indignation, justifying why you feel unfairly treated, constantly rehearsing what you're going to say or would say to that other person. The grievance grind. When you have a grievance against somebody out there, it's like drinking poison, hoping that they will die. That grievance grind is hurting you. I want you to understand something about the power of your mind. I mean, even science knows about the power of your mind. The placebo effect has validated the power of your mind. Your mind is not just sometimes powerful some of the time. It's not just a little powerful some of the time. Your mind is all powerful all of the time. You are always experiencing the results of your mind. You are always in prayer. Your prayers are always being answered. And guilt and grievances are at the root of all suffering. Guilt is a prayer for suffering. It's a silent prayer of the heart that says, Father, I've done something terrible. I need to suffer. I need to pay the debt that I owe for the terrible thing that I've done. And that silent prayer of the heart is answered. And you've doomed and condemned yourself to yet another death experience. Your grievance is the same thing. Your grievance is a prayer, a silent prayer of the heart, sometimes not all that silent, that says, Father, that one out there did a terrible thing. Make sure that they suffer. But there is no one out there. So that prayer of the heart calling for the suffering of your brother will boomerang on you, and you will get the result. So, obviously, forgiveness is highly recommended. Recognize, for example, let's talk about forgiving the grievance. Recognize, first of all, that you have a grievance. The grievance grind is going on in your mind. Forgive. And you say to me, how do I forgive? Forgiveness is not easy. I agree with you. Forgiveness is not easy. I'll go you one further. Forgiveness is not only not easy, you can't do it. You literally can't do it without help. The best that you can do is get in touch with a little willingness. Get in touch with a little willingness to forgive. Get in touch with a little willingness to let go of that grievance. Now that's the hardest part to do, because you're getting juice out of the grievance. You're walking around talking to other people, trying to find others that will validate the way that you feel, trying to find others that will justify your grievance, sharing your perspective with them on how terrible your brother was. And you're getting juice out of that. You need to at least be able to let that go and get in touch with a little willingness. If you can use the idea that your grievance is causing your suffering, use that to motivate you to get in touch with a little willingness to let the grievance go. Once you get in touch with that willingness, then come into alignment with that awakened part of your mind, that Christ part of your mind, that Holy Spirit part of your mind. Come into alignment with that and ask for help. Father, lift this burden of this grievance from me. Breathe. Breathe and let it go. Let the grievance go. Doesn't that feel better? You'll feel a weight being lifted from you. Okay, we've forgiven the grievance. Now, how are you going to forgive the guilt? How are you going to forgive yourself? Ultimately, what I want to teach you is that forgiveness is not the way the world teaches it. The world teaches it in a way that says, I know you've done a terrible, awful thing, but because I'm so much better than you, I'll be magnanimous and forgive you. That's not forgiveness. That's an attack. Ultimately, forgiveness is a recognition. You haven't forgiven your brother until you recognize that there is nothing to forgive. You haven't forgiven your brother until you recognize that nobody did anything to you. You're experiencing the results of your mind. You are doing this to yourself. Everything you experience, you ask for and you receive is for your request. Your brother didn't do anything to you, and forgiveness is the recognition of that. Now, ultimately, you haven't forgiven yourself until you can recognize that the separation never occurred. At the beginning of this talk, I said that I was going to try to explain to you what never happened. You're only dreaming a dream. Dreams aren't real. Dreams have no effect on reality. You never could possibly be separate from God. You never could possibly be separate from God and all of creation. You are one with the wholeness of reality. I and my Father are one. Your guilt is not justified. You but dream a dream. The separation never occurred. There's no reason for you to feel guilty. All you have to do is accept and recognize that you are whole, you are complete. You are not separate. You are one. All is well.